We were just talking about Yogi and Boo Boo, playing around a little bit. I want to show you as one of the benefits of learning Hebrew.
Did you get that candy bar?
The Abba Zaba?
Yeah.
Abba Zaba?
Yeah.
A Aleph Bet Aleph, Abba, Zion, Hey Bet, Zaba. So Jamie and Eileen found this Abba Zaba candy bar. It's like, okay, long-lasting fun? What could be long-lasting fun about Abba Zaba? Well, Yahweh says, I am a father to you, Israel. You are my firstborn son, right? In the blue hand of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Creator. And then we've got this, picture this as gold, okay? This yellow gold, this fluorescent yellow. The word Zaba, if you look in the dictionary on page 194, Zion Hey means this, or which, or this which, you might say. And it's also, though it doesn't say it in this dictionary, and this is where you have to look up in other places, it means lamb. Zion Hey can mean lamb. I mentioned this once before. So when you look at the seventh letter Zion and the fifth letter Hey, which is to say the revealing, and the Zion is the set apart, distinctive, most observable pinnacle of its form, most specified. Zion Hey or Zion Aleph Tav, both words mean this, right, look at this one right here. Like the seventh day is the Zion, this cutoff day. Well, Zion Hey means to look at something noticeably, but Zion Hey Bet means gold. It also means to gild or plate with gold, or glittered like gold, gold-colored or golden. So interestingly enough, do these guys know Hebrew? This gold candy wrapper, Abba Zaba, these gloves, Yahweh's golden treasure, this which is, remember, Hey Bet, as in Ahava is the word meaning to give. You could say this which Abba has given to his Bet, his house. Yahweh's gold, this which he has given to his house, his treasure, Abba Zaba. So you sit here and you see this, it's like long-lasting fun. The reason we're learning this is because we want to participate in the long-lasting fun. You know, this isn't just a matter of like, oh yeah, we're playing with English and Hebrew, which we are, but what I'm saying is that once you see what's going on with the languages, you see the testimony of the truth all over the place. All over the place. There's a word that I saw in one of the Old Testament prophets. I don't remember, if it's Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, somewhere around in there. I'd have to look it up. I've got it written down, but which is to say, I'll find it if somebody wants me to. But it says, he always says, the words which I have placed in your mouth will not be removed from your mouth, or the mouth of your children, or your children's children forever. I think we might have mentioned this once before, but I'll mention it again. I'm trying to kind of overlap with some of these talks, kind of like this tank tread idea. Instead of just rolling and making distance, we're trying to go back and over it just to kind of saturate. So here's a question. What words did Yahweh put in his people's mouth which he will not take out of their mouth, them or the next generation or the next generation? Does anybody know? Which words? He says, the words that I have placed in your mouth. I never spoke Hebrew until recently, so how could that have been the words that he placed in my mouth? I mean, if you think about it, like, who's he talking to? And he says, they won't be removed from your mouth. However, the word, the Hebrew language, as I understand it, was what you might call virtually a dead language until a few years ago. A guy went back to Israel and taught his kids Hebrew and insisted on learning Hebrew, though they didn't speak Hebrew. And it was quite a struggle and wrestling for his family, but he pushed through, and now the nation speaks Hebrew, thanks to him. So are we learning it. But to think of it, you could say, well, maybe it's Hebrew, but Does anybody else have another guess? What word did Yahweh mean when he says, the words that I have placed in your mouth? You could say, well, the covenant that Moshe gave, and it's like, okay, does that mean that Yahweh is going to see to it that somebody's going to be preaching the Ten Commandment book of Exodus, whether it's in the Christian church or the synagogue studying Talmud or whatever, somewhere on the face of the earth? But he said, the words I have placed in your mouth will not be removed from your mouth, you or your children or your children's children. The words that he placed in our mouth. Love? Well, the word love is ahava, and you could say, in other words, I'm showing you the conundrum that we have, the difficulty we have, because we hear these things, we look at these sentences, and we go, I don't know what he's talking about. The best we can do is guess. But I'm trying to show you the system which provoked this study, like Abba Zaba. What might that mean? Well, it's Hebrew phonetics. It could be Hebrew, so let's try to spell it in Hebrew and say what it means. And it's like, hey, it just might mean something, and happen to be talking about the yod and have golden blue handle. Okay. The word for that I have placed in your mouth. The word for place happens to be Shem, Shin Mem. Now, the word Shem also means name, but it also means here or there. For example, and I know that because you could look in the dictionary and say, well, maybe it just means there, because the word here is, I think, hey yod, or it's a different word. But yet, if you read the scripture that says, I will teach this people here a little, there a little, it's Shem and Shem. It's translated both here and there. So some of this work that I'm trying to show you is stuff that I've noticed in reading the scriptures, though it's not necessarily in Strong's or in the dictionary or in, as the other guy was saying, Brown Driver Briggs lexicon, another place to look. You have to look at it as use. As a matter of fact, one person brought up earlier before we started, where do I get this notion that the aleph means I will? By use in the scriptures. If you get a Tanakh, if you don't have a Tanakh, you're not going to be able to do it. But you get a Tanakh, and you read in the English side, and when you notice somewhere, anywhere, that he says, I will do something, it's usually attached to a verb, then you find that word over on the Hebrew side, chances are it's going to start with the letter aleph. And that's how I can say, when he says, I will, it's the letter aleph. Because you take the letter aleph off the word, like I will gather is aleph sof, samik vav pei, asof. Well, that's where you get the word sofa, right? Samik pei hey, sofa is remember we said that's the couch, that the sofa that you accumulates the people in the room, that accumulates the popcorn out of your dish and the coins out of your pockets and stuff, the sofa. Sofa means to accumulate, to gather. Aleph, sof, aleph samik vav pei means I will gather, I will accumulate. So I'm studying this, then looking, it's by the use that I see, we can determine some of these things. So when you say, well, the words that I have placed in your mouth, well, the word happens, the way it's written, it starts with the letter Shin Mem. Well, the Shin Mem means here or there, which happens to be a place. Shin Mem Yod, remember this is my placing. Tav, I have placed. There's a couple different ways that it's done, but there's this one place I believe I read that has a cough at the end, that I have placed to you. I have placed this to you. Actually, your mouth would be, I believe it's pei cough or pei yod cough. That would be your mouth. But I believe it's I have placed in you, or I have placed to you, or with you, or I've given you. I have placed and given you. Does anybody recognize how to pronounce that word? Does anybody here know the Semitics, the phonetics of that word? I just gave it away. Does anybody know the phonetics of that word and know how to pronounce it? Anybody want to venture a shot? Nobody? Say it louder. Just throw out a... This is a S or an SH. This is a M, I, T, C, or a K. Semitic. If I have this old dictionary, an English dictionary, I looked in the old English dictionary and you say, well, the Semitic, it says, well, that could be the sons of Shem. And we think, oh, there's somebody's anti-Semitic, they hate the Jews. And it's like, the Semitic is a language group typical of the Middle East, going then to be the basis of the Greek, the Latin, the European, the English languages, and it has a few typical aspects of its form. The alphabet has consonants. The consonants in words are separated by vowels, and it's got tenses of either completed or incompleted. Well, that's Hebrew. That describes the structure of the Hebrew alphabet language. And what Yahweh says is, the words Semitic that I have put in your mouth, I will not be removed from your mouth or your children's mouth or their children's mouth forever. You could say, what words? What's he talking about? The Semitic alphabetic system? The language system are his words that he stuck in their mouths, which are the formation of our consciousness. But that's this riddle embedded in the word that's spelled Shin Mem Yod Tav Kaf, Semitic. If you play with the phonetics. And so a lot of this work is just playing around. If you see an English word, French, Spanish, German, there's this thing about a German word, which I don't know if we can get to. It's in Joel. It's just interesting. The more you study, the more you look, you start finding these things. You're ciphering, you're making the connections between the dots. And if you see it as a game, you have to maybe talk yourself into the enthusiastic enjoyment of it, but you got to get a taste for it. At least I do, and some other people have expressed it. Just trying to show you what this means. And then you can infer, saying, well, wait a minute, if Yahweh took this form of language and plugged it in his people's brain, what about the Oriental languages? Well, like the word samurai, though it's written in Japanese characters, it means my guard, where the word shomer, which is the same phonetic letter roots of a shin, mem, resh, shomer, watch, keep, and guard, and if you put a yod at the end, that means my watch, keep, and guard, my guard, with a samurai were the king's guard. They were like I think in the Romans had the Praetorian Guard, we have the Secret Service. They were the samurai. They were the heavily armed guys that protected the royalty. That's Japanese. You could say, well, those are different letters, but the words in the phonetics come out of the Hebrew. Anyway, you could look at other languages, Chinese and other things, and find similar ways. Of course, the Chinese got ways of talking, and some Africans have ways of talking. You could say, well, wait a minute, there was Shem, Ham, and Japheth that came out of the ark, and they split the 70 different directions after the Tower of Babel. I'm not saying that every language on the face of the earth goes back to the Semitic, but the Semitic is the Hebrew basis. And so in any of the Semitic languages, American, European, you'll probably find that you can extract pure Hebrew out of it. And I'm trying to show you a number of different words just so that you can have the fun of trying to play with it and just trying to figure these things out, like yogi and boo-boo and Tarzan and Abba Zaba, and I looked at Yabba Dabba Doo, and you could say, well, the word Yabba means to desire or to long for. Dabba is actually Dalet Bet is a bear. The Ba, remember that's a feminine ending, that's a female bear, a she bear. And Du, well, you'd spell Du as Dalet Vav, it's where we get the word duel, which means you duel with another guy, or duel, D-U-A-L, or duo, which means two. It means two. So it's like, Yabba Dabba Doo means I long and desire for a second she bear. Was that like, having a second wife? And it says, the guy who has another wife is like, actually, if you look at the word for a rival wife, it literally is the same word that means grief, woe, trouble, travail, just this. These things are embedded in the words. Anyway, back to the yod. Let's see. The thing is, if you look at these, just to address this, rather than a hammer, the whole thing is, rock work. It was said that Jesus was a carpenter, and yet it doesn't say that. The word for builder, it has to go with bet, Vav Nun, or maybe sometimes you put a Hey at the end, maybe Bet Nun Hey, but it has to do with structure and construction, where we get the word, there's a B, the Vav can sound like an O, and there's an N. That's kind of like, reading it backwards, bone. The bone is the structure, it's the building blocks, it's the timber-framed house. It says he was a builder, and so we think, oh, he's a carpenter. And it's like, if you go to Israel, there's not necessarily a lot of wood. I mean, maybe he was a carpenter, but he could have been a rock builder, and it would have fit. And there's some people that have studied this out and come to the conclusion that he could have maybe been a rock man. Kifa, that means rock also, but Kifa also, where you get the word kaf, that's a whole other study. But why I'm mentioning this is that you've got if you look at the letters around the yod, the reason for wearing this is more like the rock work, like the excavator, and the garden work, and Randy was pointing out, it's like, well, he made the garden, we wrecked the garden, and if he's going to reconstruct the garden, maybe it's more of a garden job than necessarily a hammer, so I'm just wearing the Maddox as the suitable occasion for the day, Anyway, so we have a tet, which is the number 9, a yod, which is number 10, and the kaf, which is the number 11. Or again, the kaf can be drawn like this because it's a picture of a hand, so you got the fingers. But just for the expedience sake, I draw it without that sometimes. On the chart, I drew it with the thumb. If you're trying to carve into a piece of wood, and you've got the grain of the wood, or you're chipping, writing on stone, this is really difficult. So as you notice, they'll show you other shapes of this letter. One of the shapes is this. If you're carving in wood, that's a lot easier to carve. And if the person reading it knows that's a kaf, it's like it's good enough. It's a matter of communication. It's not necessarily a matter of pure form. So, and that's where our letter K came out. It's the 11th letter. The point about these 3 letters, if you look at them working together, and that's where I said the following letter after this is the lamed, and if you put these 3 together, lamed, kaf, and yod, it sounds like lucky. That's the phonetics, is lucky. It doesn't spell lucky. If you read it, it doesn't say fortunate. And luck, I heard once, came from the word Lucifer, which had to do with the light bearer, which is the fallen angel, and that whole thing. But what I'm saying is that you can go different places. It's like the banyan tree. You can look for the word for Tarzan and spell it with a tet instead of a tav, and you can look at other words and it means other things, but I'm just trying to extract a few things that are clear just to play with. Kaf yod, ki means so, thus, but it's also, kaf yod is a burning, it says in the dictionary, or a branding. That's kaf yod. Burning and branding, well, that makes me think of the cowboys branding their cattle. And the typical picture of a cattle brand looks like a circle with an X in it. Now, how many cowboys can use that? One, because everybody else has to have a different brand, right? But if you're just going to brand something, you might say, well, that's kind of like the quintessential brand. Why? Because the X-shaped tav is the sign of a covenant. It's a sign of ownership. If you brand something, you're saying, this is mine. The letter right before the tet was the het. So the reason for yod being blue, but also we were talking about that on the chart, the het and the tet are blue, is because, as we were saying, here you have the Mishkan, the het, the big white fence, and has one door. And as I said the other day, if you've got like the Big Dipper, and then you've got, as it were, the Little Dipper, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, the 2 houses, the 2 sheepfolds coming back together, held together by the one Vav, the Mashiach, the sent one, Yod He Vav Shin Ayin, Yeshua, he's the one that holds the 2 flocks together. That looks like the modern het. Well, the Mishkan had one door. What's the door? Yeshua said, I'm the door. You can't get to the Father except through me. I'm the designated door. See this door? This Zion Hey, Zion Aleph Tav, is the word this. This door, the Zion Hey door, the Zion Aleph Tav door, it's the same word this. This door, this one, well, there was the blue, purple, red on the white linen fence of the Mishkan. It's very distinctive. Once you come in, remember there's a weapon outside the Het, the Zion, the guard that keeps anything from getting in. And once you come in, remember last week we had the Tet, the sword, and the shield, as it were, the Tet, the offense and defense, the guard inside that would kick anybody out that got in that weren't supposed to. But once you come in, another way to see the Tet is branded. Once you come in to this Het, Yahweh says, anything in here is mine. Now the thing is, when you join the military, they can sucker you in by saying anything. I remember my brother had and his friend were going to have this buddy system way back when going to Vietnam, and it was just like, as soon as you signed up, anything you signed up for doesn't count. Were they lying? No. Before you signed up, you were a person and they had to talk to you. Once you sign up, you're their property. They owe you nothing. You're their property. You're a number, you're a machine, you're not a person. When you come into the kingdom of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, you are no longer your own. You were bought, you were paid for. You're no longer your own. We talked about the guy who came up to the threshold of the door, had the awl, the pin, the vav stuck in his ear, the blood went down on the doorpost, and he says, I have now yielded my sovereignty to another. I have chosen to become a bonded servant, a bond servant for the rest of my life. He will now take care of me, and I'll do everything at his pleasure. It was a good deal. When we sign up to, you might say, nurse off the government shed, as if the government is our Shaddai, we're saying the same thing. Please take care of me. It'll cost you. You'll owe us everything. That's fine. Just take care of me. But if we don't want the government to take care of us because we want Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and his promises to be our hope, why should we go to the door of the government office and have them stab all through our ear, bleed on their post, and say, I am now your bondservant? You see, we don't have to do that. As a matter of fact, I was reading in Hosea where it says, and I said at the end of the week last week, I says, Israel, do not trust in the USA and do not trust in your F-16s. We know we must trust in Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. I was quoting scripture in the book of Hosea, but what it said was, Assyria will not save us. We will not trust in chariots and horses. We'll trust in Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Well, I'm just saying Assyria was the powerhouse of the military in the neighborhood, like the United States is. The chariots were like the F-16s. The riders on the horses is our military. And it's like, I'm not saying anything about us. What I'm saying is, I'm trying to quote scripture and make it present tense. Israel better not, we better not trust in the might of any of these guys. You know, we were talking earlier about these incredible weapons we now have. But remember, Dan was like the snake in the grass who bites at the horse's heels and the rider falls backwards. And I mentioned that you've got this story about the high horse, and horses of a certain number of hands high were automatically belonged to the government, automatically belonged to the royalty. And you see this guy on his high horse, which was like the nobility, riding through, no enemies in sight. Man, they're just plowing through. Nobody can take these guys down. But Yahweh has a camouflaged little snake hiding in the grass, and he'll say, I know how to get this guy. He bites at the horse's hoofs. The guy falls backwards, and if you were a knight with armor, when you fell backwards on your back, and this thing, you got 100 pounds of armor on, you're not getting up so quick. It might have even done some damage to you. My point is, Yahweh has his ways, and when he says, do not trust, do not fear, Abraham took on 800,000 armed soldiers. Now, they might have been done pillaging, and they might have been half drunk, and Yahweh might have knocked them out the way he did the million-man army and the 185,000 Assyrians. Nevertheless, Abraham said, I was told not to fear, therefore my job, my yod, my work is to not fear. Does anybody know the most often repeated commandment in the entire scriptures from Genesis to Revelation? The most often repeated commandment. Anybody want to venture a guess?
Fear not, do not fear.
Altera. Do not fear. Altera. Yahweh might put us into situations But he said, don't fear. Another one says, and I'm translating, it says, do not be broken before them. Don't let them see you start to sweat. Don't let them see your knees knocking. Don't let them see you go. Don't do that. What's our job? What's our yod? You see, if Yahweh says between Aleph and Yod means, Aleph is a prefix, means I will, this is who I am. Yod means this is mine, this is my identity between the Aleph and the Yod. Go back and listen to the first 9 tapes. This is Yahweh's identity. When you come into the Het and he stamps you, that's the place where circumcision is, right? Not outside, but inside. Cut the circle and, I belong to Yahweh. My parents dedicated me to Yahweh. I'm his. He is my master. Not the thing that used to wear the hat isn't the master. No, the hat got cut off and tossed, and now there's a ring around the collar, and it's, Yahweh's my boss, like where you've seen the blue Zitzi thread, which is the other little image on the chart. If you see it, there's like the hat flying off and this branding iron. That's what that's for. Anyway, the point is, you come into the kingdom and you're branded belonging to Yahweh. Remember, a tet is what spins, like this shield, is round. And so picture a pot on a spinning wheel, and now you have the hand of the Creator forming the pot. The picture of the potter is used in the Scriptures. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Can't the potter do what he wants and make of the clay whatever he will? Should the clay protest to the potter and say, why have you made me so? This is Scripture. If you see the pictures, that's the tet and the yod. The potter's spinning, the hand of the potter, work gloves, working, the working blue hand. And so the concept of coming into the kingdom, the het, the kingdom of who? The 4-colored name, blue, purple, red. Blue, the hand of the Creator. Purple, the royal decrees, the Torah. Red, the red Vav man, Yeshua, who was died, who manifested, who shed his red blood so that we could come in and then do the righteous works. Hey, the white linen fence, blue, purple, red, white, Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. I'm going kind of fast. We talked about it previously. That's like the gate. You come into Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. The 4 colors is his name in color. You come into the kingdom, the het of Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, and he throws you on the tet and he forms you after his image. Remember, Yogi and Boo-Boo? Just like me, he forms the clay. The man of earth, Adam, means red earth. He forms the man of earth like clay to be after his own image. Het, tet, yod. But how much of the image is he going to require? Kaf lamed is the word all. Lucky Israel, lamed kaf yod, just like me. All of us get to be made in all his attributes just like him. That's the agenda. Yeshua said, you better count the cost. Because the man who puts his hand to the plow and looks back isn't worthy of me. You better count the cost. Here, Zion, count the Zion. 7. Remember, 7 sevens, counting how many times should I forgive a man? 7 times, 70 times 7. It's all about sevens because 7 is Zion, which is Shavah, which is a full measure. We're in the midst of the festival of Shavuot, of counting 7 sevens. We just got through the 5th Shabbat. We're on to the 6th week here, counting the days. The word Shavah means a full measure. It's a 7, which is say, oh, okay, you're going to swear on a stack of Bibles. Then we'll know you're telling the truth because a sworn oath is a Shavah, a Shin Bet Ayin. A 7 is a sworn oath. It's also a curse or an obligation with the weight of the curse. It's an obligation by the vow of an oath. Is a Shavah, Shin Bet Ayin, which is the number 7, Shin Bet Ayin. So if you're going to swear on a stack of Bibles, why should Yeshua said, let your yea be yea and your nay nay. You don't have to swear on a stack of Bibles because they were swearing by the temple or swearing by the gold of the temple or swearing by Elohim of the temple. And he says, it's either yes or no. But if you have to swear on a stack of Bibles, how many would fit the stack to be an appropriate number? Is 2 better than 1? How about 7? It's representative, is representing the full weight, the burden. I'm telling you the truth. That's what you're saying when you say 7. Consider 7. Consider the burden of this sworn oath that our forefathers swore to at Mount Sinai. I can show you verses, which we're not going to have time for, in Joel, in Amos, in Hosea, in Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, and Isaiah. They all talk about the same subject. Our forefathers swore to an oath with a curse and a blessing. They chose the curse. We've inherited the residual circumstances of that cursing. But Yahweh said he will restore the blessing. For us to come to this and consider the terms and come into the chet and be thrown on the potter's wheel to be, as it were, circumcised. And he said, there was one place very interesting, in a different translation of the Bible, it says, my people Israel, remove the barrier from your heart. Remove the barrier from your heart? It's translated, circumcise your hearts. How do you circumcise your hearts? You know, you get the whole other picture. He said, remove the barrier from your heart. Oh, if you put it that way, I can see it a whole different way. It's like, are you warm and affectionate? The word for warm and affectionate happens to be rachem, similar to the word for Rachel or Rachel, which is resh chet mem. Chet mem is the word for warm. It's also the word for womb. It's also the word for the comforting and the tender nurturing of a mother with her baby. And Yahweh is saying that's what he wants us to do with his stuff, his words. And if we are tender and loving concerning his words, he will be tender and loving about us. It's a reciprocal relationship. And he made it real easy. He said, here's the work of my hand, and he described it between Aleph and Yod. And then you get to the next letter, see the Yod, my, see, so you have Aleph, this is the first letter, Zion, Het, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, but 11, well, this is Kaf. Now, the Kaf means you, so if you're reading Aleph through Yod as a word, this is what I have done for you. Like this is Semitic. The Kaf, it can mean for you, but then you could say, well, what about you? This is what I've done for you, but the Kaf is a prefix. Now, if this sets up a word headed that direction through the alphabet, the Kaf means like. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to be like this. So that you could break up the first 10 letters as meaning, I will, this is my stuff for you, Kaf, the 11th letter. But now you're supposed to be like, see, there's a disposition, there's a change. The first 10 letters are a minyan, a group. So the word for minyan, mem nun yod nun, as I wrote that before, you look up in the dictionary and it basically means a quorum, but it also means from where. The word money comes from mini, which is mem nun yod, which is minyan, same root. It has to do with destiny, fate, or apportionment. You say, well, yeah, but mem nun is later, but mem nun comes after lamed. Yod kaf lamed mem nun. The word for money, mem nun yod, but you say, well, a minute, this is our stuff. So if Yahweh says, I am Aleph through Yod, this is my stuff, and the word amen, Aleph mem nun, remember, means I will bring forth all of what you have put between the Aleph and the Yod. You see, for us to say amen is to say we have agreed to be thrown on the potter's wheel, to be formed into his image, to be just like him. Amen. To do all of it faithfully, responsibly, without squabbling and snivel and bickering and fighting each other and arguing about it and giving him grief, all of which Israel did. But we are volunteering to remove the barrier of our heart to say, look I maybe don't understand this Sabbath stuff. I maybe don't understand these festivals. How could you understand them? You see, The Sabbath day, though it's the seventh day, and it represents the number 7, there's more than one way to read this stuff. But the 7, the Zion, you can say, well, that's like the Sabbath day, but it's outside the fence. But you see, there's another letter that represents the Sabbath day, and that's the Zadi, because the pattern of the Mishkan pattern says Chet, Tet, and Yod is the first position. They're all the blue. The Kaf and Lamed are in purple, the Mem and Nun are in red, and then you've got Samik, Ayin, Pei, and then you've got the Zadi. Well, as the groupings, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th is the Zadi. So if the 7th of the Zadi represents the Sabbath day inside, which is the sprout, which is the symbol, the word Zadi means righteous. Zadik is the righteous one, the righteous priest. Zadekah is doing righteous philanthropic good deeds. You might say the full understanding of the Sabbath day you only got from the inside when you, Kaf, you have processed Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samik, Ayin, Pei. Then you might comprehend the Sabbath day from inside. But outside, all you see is the testimony that it's the day that's raised up. The Shabbat, it's a special day. Like Yeshua, he was raised up. This one, Zion Aleph Tav. Like the serpent, the flaming one that Moshe lifted up on the stake and said, look here and you'll be saved from your viper bite. You see, the Sabbath day is lifted up on the outside as something go, what are you guys doing anyway? It's lifted up as a spectacle outside the fence to designate the significance of the name of the Creator, Yod He Vav He, who rested on the 7th day. But on the outside, that's all you know. What the Yod says on the inside, remember Yod means the blue, the hand of the Creator, which is Het, Tet, and Yod, is like, you come in here, Tet, I claim you as my own, my Yod, my own, my seal, my branding. This is a circumcision, meaning you belong to me. This is not just something that your culture does, your doctors do, because it's a tradition. It's really a statement. This is dedicated to Yahweh. This belongs to Him. So that's why these 3 are in the blue. Like Passover. The first festival of Passover, the second one of unleavened bread separating leaven from unleavened, the third one counting like the period of gestation, then the fall festivals, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret. The point is, you come into this kingdom and you go, okay, I now belong to Him. Now from the inside of the fence, you see His things His way. How can you know His things His way from outside the fence? It's impossible. All you see of the Sabbath day outside is that it's a cut-off day. It's a separated day. But you don't know anything about it. You don't know what it means. You don't know how it applies to Yahweh. You don't know how it applies to the festivals. You don't know how it applies to the covenant with Israel, because all that is private information. It's for the people of the kingdom, of the family. It's called Sod level. Brad Scott did a whole study. Sod means family secrets, which is why Jamie was saying, listen, if you want this stuff, once we get inside the chet, you should sign up. We're not just going to throw it out there. Well, we should throw it out there so that anybody can have it, but on the other hand, you don't just come barging in. If you come barging in, if you haven't taken certain prerequisite classes and you come barging into some college class and you have no idea what they're talking about, you'll confuse everybody else, you'll just make trouble. Get out. Go take the prerequisite classes. It's the same type of a thing. If you come in here sniveling and bickering and arguing and complaining, just get out. Count the cost. And if you've considered the cost and you've decided to come in, throw yourself up on the potter's wheel and be ready for some around and around, working that clay. I think I mentioned once before that I had worked some clay one time, and I had put some paint in the clay to color it. It was some oil-based clay, and I set it down. It was a long time before I got back, it was a few years. But then I wanted to use the clay to make these things for doing some animation. Some of the clay, that because of the type of paint that was in it, some of the clay got really hard, and some of it was gooey and soft. And some clay sounds like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Some of the clay was very manageable, and I thought, wow, I can't throw away any of the clay because it was certain colors and I needed to use it, but I will take the clay that resists me and I'll pound it and I'll beat it and I'll grind it and I'll dump some oil back into it, and I'll work it, and I'll just use it to put a veneer of color on the objects I'm making. And then I'll take the gooey clay, and I'll try to maybe add some other stuff, but maybe I'll just smear it, and it'll be like, I'll figure out something to do with this, but gosh, this stuff, man, I just hate working with it. But the good clay, oh boy, I'm going to make some nice pieces with this. Form the features of the faces of the characters. And I thought as I was working this, it's like, this is speaking to me. I choose to be the workable clay. What a stark picture. It's like, gosh, Yahweh, sorry for the resistance. Sorry for the gooey, gummy, whatever I might be doing. Please, I don't know how to do it, but make me workable clay. How do I get there? The preference, the dalit, the choice. Choose to be the workable clay. It goes all back to the message that's in the letters. The golden treasure, Abba Zaba, is to choose, and he will do it. Choose, and he will use you. Choose, and he will make you. Just choose to be on the spinning potter's wheel. Choose to be workable clay. Oh, he'll work you. But the more you resist, when he shows you, you're resisting me, okay. I don't like this Sabbath day thing. But okay. Whatever it might be. Because then we have to sit there and say, why is he doing this anyway? He's already told us in the letters why he's doing this. So that we can be just like him, me. He wants us to be just like him. And we can sit there and say, well, he had this Sabbath day trip going on, but, I've been there, done that. You haven't been there and done that. Have any of us accurately kept the Sabbath day? I heard the Jews have this saying that when's the Messiah going to come? If every Jew in the world could just keep the Sabbath day 2 weeks in a row, well, the first week could have been by accident, but 2 weeks, that's now got to be intentional. Get them all. Just keep the Sabbath day 2 weeks in a row. That'll bring the Messianic kingdom. That'll bring the Messiah. It ain't going to happen. Why can I say it's not going to happen? Because can I even keep it? I don't know. The point is, do we have the desire? Do we have the choice? Do we want to? And I can't say, well, it's dependent on everybody else. It's not dependent on all the Jews in the world keeping the Sabbath day. I can tell you that. It's dependent on, well, here's the question. How many of who has to do what, for how long, with what heart, before he steps in and says, now, we weren't waiting on the time clock, we were waiting for my people to choose to do it with what heart? Now we're going to do it. And so then you go back and you read in the book of Joel and Amos and Hosea and Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah, and you realize it's all talking about this. Every one of these guys were trying to compel Israel to do this stuff that we're talking about so that we could get the benefit of what Yahweh said he was going to do once we did it. So the point of telling you this is to say Yahweh's work of his hand, his Yod, he's manifested in Aleph through Yod. He made the creation, he set up physics, he put the bet, the physical universe, spun the thing, put it in the Gimel, set up this system of reciprocity with the Vav and the bridge and we discussed all these things. These are concepts that he embedded. He designed psychology, he designed what some might call karma or sowing and reaping, what goes around comes around. He put all these things, established them as systems. That is what he, the Aleph, yoded. And then he says, I'm going to tell you how to work. I'm going to tell you how to yod. And then you look at the book of Joel, and he says, praise, exalt, extol the name, the Shem of Yahweh. Say, Hodu la Yawal ki tov, ki leolam chazdo. Leolam Vayed means forever and ever. Leolam Chazdo means your mercy endures forever. This thing here, of course, is written backwards. It says unto eternity, or Leolam Vayed. The point is, he made our work as difficult as sit down on the seventh day. Have the parties that I tell you to have 7 times a year. If you have other parties, that's up to you, but don't say they're mine. The ones I give you are mine. Glorify my name. How do you glorify his name? Zion v'chet. Set apart his prescribed area of concerns. What are his areas of concerns? His name and his day. The fact that he's the Yod creator of the universe. If we exalt his name as being the creator of the universe, recognized by the day that he rested after he created it 6 days, and that he gave us the 7 festivals, we've done what he's asked us to do. He didn't make it any harder than that, other than he said, and quit ripping each other off. I've given you everything, so if you steal from one another, what you're doing is saying, what, you don't trust me? Or you're just trying to give the other guy grief? Why are you doing that? He says, listen, I've given you abundance, so you should share abundantly. Why? Because I've given you everything anyway. There's no reason to be stingy. But read through the Old Testament. Every single complaint he has against his people is because of oppression, basically dealing with the commodity of possessions. His people wanted to rip everybody else off. Why? He said, I'd give you everything you need. And we go, yeah, but I'm not sure he doesn't have it. I'm going to take what's his. It's like, see how we are? That's been the trouble all the way along. What is our work? What is the yod that is our responsibility? And then you go to Micah 6:8, which lines up with the Psalmic guy in Pei, and he says, years ago, I was saying, well, you got all this stuff. You got millions of sermons. You've got all these teachings. You got tapes and books. And what's so difficult? What's the bottom line? Why doesn't he just make it clear? Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O man, what is good, what Yahweh requires of you. Psalmic, like the menorah. Do justly. That's fair balances. Justice. Do what you say you're going to do. Do justly. The Ion, which is the scales of balance, if you look at it, lines up with the constellation of Libra, the scales, and he says, love mercy. I told the story a few weeks ago about having a chance to call the cops on this guy who was mouthing off that was parked in the handicap zone, and the thought came to me, love mercy. Here's an occasion to show mercy. It's like, what a great thing. I now have been given an opportunity to choose mercy. I didn't call the cops because I saw this as an occasion to work and manipulate righteousness to my advantage. It did him a service too, though he didn't even know it. He had no clue what I had the thought to do to him, nor does it matter. My point is, as I said earlier, Yahweh says, my people are wise and cunning and shrewd when crafty when it comes to manipulating wickedness, but when it comes to righteousness, they haven't got a clue. See, if I was manipulating wickedness, it's like, I'm going to go over there and call the cops and give this guy a ticket because he was mouthing off. See, that's cunning, manipulating wickedness. Wickedness, I wasn't being wicked, he was being wicked. No, but wickedness is giving your neighbor grief. Resh ayin means wicked, ill, bird, just, putting a wrench on his head. Resh ayin also means neighbor, associate, companion, fellow man. So when you put when you go to torque the guy's head, you're doing wickedly, even though he may deserve it. But to love mercy means, hey, wait a minute. Yahweh gave me the eyeball, the insight to see, here's an occasion that I can manipulate mercy. I can give this guy mercy that he doesn't deserve, and in so doing, put the right to receive mercy that I don't deserve in the scales of balance for some time in the future that I may need it. Like putting those ace up your sleeve, thinking, one of these days I'm going to have a card game. I'm going to load the deck, stick an ace up my sleeve. We don't know that. We don't think that way. But in Yahweh's place, he says, you'll need it. You're going to step on somebody's, you're going to bump into somebody, sorry about that. You're going to smash their car. Would you like to have some mercy? Did you prepay yourself mercy by giving somebody else who didn't deserve it mercy previously? And then something might come to your mind. It's like, I could have done that. I could. It's like, you want to be Yahweh's? He has shown you a man what is good and what Yahweh requires of you. Do justly, which is to say, make sure you've done the right thing and don't rip somebody else off. Love mercy. When somebody else does the wrong thing and they've ripped you off, figure out how to manipulate it and spin it to their advantage and your advantage. That's loving mercy. And Pei, walk humbly with the word humbly there means like a downcast head. It means not with your nose up in the air, walking arrogant. Come boldly before the throne of grace. It's like, you might come, hey, thank you, Yahweh. What do we, when we have this doctrine of coming boldly, is that arrogant? Is that presumption? We better be careful. I'm not saying we shouldn't have a certain boldness, but Abraham said, boldly I will come against my enemies, because Yahweh told me my hand will prevail in whatever I set my hand to. He gave me that promise. I'm taking him at his word. There's something about that attitude, is coming boldly before the throne of grace. Again, you have to take these Christian notions and plug Hebraic Torah concepts into them the same way you take English words like yogi and boo-boo and yabba dabba doo and figure out what they mean Hebraically. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying we need to figure out what the truth is by plugging in what we hear into the Hebraic context. If he said your work is to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your Elohim, how hard is that? How hard is the laboring hand? Yahweh said, read the book of Joel. He said, I have sent 4 types of devouring locusts. I sent them. They're my army to wipe you out, Israel. You're my people, and I sent them to wipe you out. But I'm the Creator who causes the grass to grow, and I will cause the garden to replant. Again, the tool, replanting the garden. Yahweh says, I'll replant the garden. What's your job? Adam's job originally wasn't to till the soil. Adam's job was to shemer, to watch, keep, and guard. He told Israel, your job is to shema, hear, believe, and do. Do? That sounds like work. What kind of work? He said, I told you, in quietness and rest was your strength. Sit down on the Shabbat, on the festivals. Leviticus 23. But you would not. You said, no, on fast horses we will flee. We will run. We'll fight that enemy. He says, okay, I'm the Creator. I can give the breeding of bigger, faster, meaner horses to your enemies. We can't outrun him. We can't contend with him. Why don't we just do what he said? What did he say? Read in Joel. Your work is to exalt his name. And if we exalt his name, he will cause the garden to grow. He will cause the weather to cooperate. He will send the rain in its season, the early rain, the latter rain. But you know what we have done? Does anybody know what HAARP is? HAARP. I'm not going to get into that right now, but the thing about HAARP, our collectively, world scientists, for the last 20, 30 years, have been attempting to manipulate the weather. They seed the sky with chemtrails. Look it up on the internet if you want. Chemtrails, putting chemicals in the sky to manipulate things, including causing earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes, storms. Hey, let's not go there. But the point is, men not choosing to obey the commandments of the Creator of the heavens and earth have decided to defy him and to pull the reins out of his hand and control the weather themselves. And yet, if you read the scriptures, Yahweh's promise of the restored blessing to his people Israel is, he says, I will make nature and the weather cooperate and give you food to abundance, and you will be full. There's a word here in the scriptures that's translated, you will be full, or you'll be fed until you're saturated, or you've had plenty. But the word is unto Shin Bet Ayin, which means according to the terms of the sworn oath. Yahweh says, you see, if you read it in English, it says, oh, you will have food until you've had plenty. That's what it says in the translation. But if you look at it in Hebrew, Yahweh says, I will make the garden regrow and give you everything you need according to the sworn oath. Just like your forefathers received the curse. And there's other verses that talk about the full weight of the curse, like a giant boulder. And remember that picture of the excavator in the very beginning, picking up the boulders and throwing them? Yahweh says, I'm the guy that dumped the boulders on your head earlier. It wasn't the devil. Because you disobeyed me, I dumped the boulders on your head, and my blessing is this. I will pick up the boulders and throw them away, and you guys can yodel. Because the yod of El is for us to prevail against all the nature and against our adversaries, and we don't need to fear any world order, any kingdom that would stand up and say, we are the mighty ones. Anybody that might say, we now control the weather. We don't need anybody to control the weather for us. The control of the weather is a blessing from the hand of the Yod of El, who said, I made heaven and earth, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. I will make the weather cooperate with you and give you the rain in your seasons, and the ground will sprout and bring forth all the food you need, and you will sell it and not have to borrow, and you will not have to put your head under the yoke of your adversaries, of your neighbors, because you're too poor, and never more will you be ashamed. Never more will anybody have to say, where is their Elohim who gave them all those stupid promises? Ha! Why can they say that? Because we haven't kept his word. And the great burdensome job of the work, the toil that he put on us was to rest. On the seventh day, the sign that he is our Elohim and that we are his people. That's what the seventh day is. So to come into the het, he put on the spinning wheel, and he says, every time it spins around, every seventh day, stop. It'll spin around on the seventh day, stop. And as the year spins, on the commanded festivals, the Moedim, Ed, Ayin, Dalet, the witness, the testifier, the testimony that we are his, because the testimony, the loot, as it were, that was ripped off, is that we'll do what he said. That's the testimony. That's the evidence. That's the time. Until the time of what? Until the time that we are willing to do what he said, as he said. And then Kuf Zadi, you see it's translated the end. Kuf is almost like this shackle, and Zadi is the sprout open. As I said once before, the word Pei Zadi is an open mouth, so Kuf Zadi is like an open shackle. You want to get loose of your enemies? I will break their chains off you if you simply sit down when I told you to and keep the festivals as I told you to. And I believe we're out of time.
Well, thank you very much. That was great, Eric. And I guess next week we're going to the 11th letter, which is going to be it's going to be the Kuf.
Kaf.
So we're going to take a few minutes, but before we do that, we're going to wrap up. If you have any questions on the first 10 letters, we can bring those up now. Okay, well, I think our cameraman does. What do you got there, cameraman?
When the Kohanim recites the Aaronic lesson, he takes his hands and forms praise over the congregation. So I thought that was pretty interesting what you were talking about, live long and prosper and spot. And that's the very same thing that the Kohanim do.
There's, just for what it's worth, we had a conversation earlier. We've all heard a lot of Christian evangelical TV, radio, missionary proselytizing. We're very familiar. Does anybody ever hear the Jews doing that? You don't. Why is that? Or have you? Now, I don't want to be too general here because I don't know the details, but I know this. It's generally regarded that a lot of Jewish people run things, like Hollywood, like the banking industry, whatever, but Hollywood especially seems to be run by a bunch of them. And we were talking about earlier, and again, I don't know what I'm talking about, so I hope I'm not offending anybody, but a movie came out many years ago called The Extraterrestrial, E.T. And I asked some friends this morning, we were talking, I says, if you were going to spell E.T. in Hebrew, what would it be? Does anybody want to venture a guess? How would you spell E.T., as in The Extraterrestrial, a Hollywood movie from years ago? I think Spielberg worked on it, right? How would you spell that in Hebrew? Aleph Tav. It's pronounced et. Aleph Tav, the one word that's not translated. What's it mean? The beginning and the end. It's about the Messiah, right? The Mashiach. Yeshua said, I'm the beginning, I'm the end, the book of Revelation. Do you know what that movie was about? You ever go back and look at it? It's about this one coming from outer space, the extra